afternoon. Appreciate you all being here. This is our second meeting of the year. Appreciate folks who took the time to listen in and be with us this evening. And we are still under a pandemic, and it's a challenging time. We're hopeful that we will start to see more folks who are receiving the vaccines and continue to see the numbers decrease in terms of positive tests. And so as I have been engaged with our county officials, I think it's important for us to continue to be diligent about making sure that we wear our masks, that we continue to keep socially distant and accommodate each other as we get through this pandemic. So with that, I will start our meeting with a call to order and ask if there are any adjustments to tonight's agenda by council.
Mayor, if there's no adjustments from council, from the staff, I would like to at this time, this is Black History Month, and we did not put it out into the agenda out of respect. We would like to take this moment to recognize the fact that it is Black History Month. Yourself being the first mayor in Iredell County, African American descent, we are proud to have you as such. We would also like to recognize the fact that we have Felina Harris, who's the first African American female to serve in Troutman's council as such, and we're proud to have her on the board. We also had J.C. Walker, who was the first African American to serve in Iredell County as the position as the police chief. Way back in the 1970s and early 80s when he was in that capacity. We would like to have a formal recognition at Thursday night's council meeting, but we wanted to do that if you all will allow that to be done. And the reason we did not put that in the packets, you all having the positions that you have, we wanted to give you all that honor and recognition tonight, and also make it formal recognition at Thursday night meeting in front of everyone. And we have invited the Walker family to come here. His widow and daughter, who also was a first, as the first African American female to be a detective at the Statesville Police Department. She is planning on joining us at the meeting then, if you all will allow. And there are a lot of firsts in the town of Troutman, and we like to lead the way in Iredell County. But there are a lot of others for Black History Month in the town of Troutman that we would like to recognize, but we would be afraid that if we recognize those individuals by name, that we would miss some others that are that way. But in talking with staff beginning last week, and how we would like to honor and appreciate those, and taking one of your statements last year, Mayor, that you did with a business piece. And I'm going to mess up your quote, and I apologize in advance. But one of the ways to recognize some of those in our history that have done so much in recognizing what they did to shape America. The best way that you can do that is to go out and volunteer in our community and give back to the community for the various services. You did that prior to becoming mayor. Felina did that, as we recognized her last year before she became a council person. And J.C. Walker did that when he was a pro baseball player, and then he came back here a lot of times working 18 and 19-hour shifts because our police department back then was very short-staffed, and then he would come and coach a bunch of misfits, and I was one of them, as baseball players. You all doing that as citizens definitely is some that we would hope other people in the community would strive for, and we would surely hope you all will give us the opportunity of recognizing you officially Thursday.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Unless there's any
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made, receive the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. All right, we will continue down with our general business. First item is any comments from council and myself. I will start with Ms. Williams.
I have none at this time.
Ms. Harris.
Just have a couple of comments. Thank you, Ron, for bringing that up. That was one of my comments was gonna be, that I was happy to see, the town recognizing Black History Month on their website. So, thank you for that. I also wanted to, I was reading the minutes and I saw, Councilmember Harris made a comment, and I was like, wait a minute, no, I didn't. And I realized, there's two Harrises now. So I know that Kim is probably going to make sure that we distinguish between F. Harris and P. Harris.
Well,
in the minutes.
the agenda briefing minutes, you weren't here, so it was just Harris, and then I realized at the other meeting, I think I put both names on those sets of minutes.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, I will from both sets of names.
As long as I'm not the only one that's got to deal with it. We solved one with Paul, and we created another one with Harris.
Harris, you can take it over.
Yeah.
Felina, I feel your pain.
And if this is not the appropriate place for this, you can stop me. But I wanted to, inquire about, and Ron, on one of your, messages, you said that if a new issue comes up that staff doesn't know about, you wanna take time to go back and investigate it. But I wanted to ask a question about stump dumps in Troutman.
Yes?
And if this is something that someone needs to go back and bring me back, that's fine, or bring back to the, council. Cause I was just curious about whether they are illegal, they're not illegal, or if we have any, what's the status of them? So I was just curious about those. I did get a question from a citizen, but I just wanted to ask about them before I presented what they asked me about.
I can answer that for you without any research.
Okay.
They are illegal. At this point in time, our UDO does not allow it. They have been discussed on a couple occasions. The most recent one, I can't remember specifically if it was November or October, but there was a couple folks came forward and trying to get one rezoned, some property that was in the county, and at that time the council voted that they did not want that particular property to be rezoned. But at this time, our UDO does not allow it. Anytime a property owner would like to consider for there to be one, all they have to do is go through and make the appropriate zoning request and to go through there. The town is looking at one particular property now that is in violation. And they have been notified that they are in violation and have been currently being fined because they are in violation. And we have tried to work with the person that is on the operation of that dump, and also have been in communications with the property owner that it is in violation and why it has been. There is additional property that is below town that for whatever reason continues to allow to dump, that has, I personally, since being the manager, have received no less than 5 phone calls that it is being improperly dumped on. Jonathan and I have spoke about it. The code enforcement officer and I have spoke about it. It's bothersome to the citizens of the town, but it is not in our ETJ, and that dump has been talked about to the county, and that's in the county's hands.
Anybody ask the citizen, are they concerned about something or just asking general information?
They actually, it's the person with the stump dump, the one that he was talking about is in violation.
I see, okay.
But I didn't have enough, I told him I would just have to ask, I don't know any information, so.
I would be happy to speak with you more about it outside the meeting.
Okay.
And give you more of a history about all that has transpired to my knowledge about it, and have talked with the property owner to my knowledge of what has transpired. because there were some misunderstandings as to whether they thought they were legal or not. Even the operator thinking that it was legal at some point in time and it was not. I'd be most happy to discuss it with you more.
Great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Hinkle?
That's not at this time.
Mr. Harris? Hi. Mr. Rao?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just got one question, only because it's 30 days, and it seems sometimes when we forget about stuff, it gets put on the back burner. So I was just wondering if we could get an update on the South Iredale High School Greenway with the financial picture with our recourses on the construction.
Gary may have something different than I have, but at this point, there has been communications back and forth, and there is basically some communications with the one company, Kessler. Is that the correct name, Gary? And they think that the brand of testing that they have done has been accepted by DOT in the past, and we are waiting on communications to see if that will suffice. But Gary has submitted appropriate communications notifying them the town's intentions, and it's negotiations at this point and wait and sees from what DOT will and will not accept. Is that fair, Gary?
Yeah, and also we're waiting, if you remember, the last time we talked about the council meeting, we were also gonna wait until, the payment request was submitted to DOT and see what they actually pay. Yes, I sent letters to Country Boy and to Kessel was submitting more information to DOT. I believe I saw an email that DOT has denied that. So since then, I haven't heard anything else from Country Boy or Kessel. So we're also waiting for, see what DOT pays.
Well, we have submitted that request, so we should hear from them shortly, hopefully.
Okay, thank you. That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, sir.
So, in our normal way, again, appreciate your comments, Ron. I will make my usual comments at the meeting on Thursday, in honor of Black History Month. I appreciate all the work that you continue to do with the staff. I know we'll talk probably a little bit about the ball field, but they look good. So good job, Emily and team, and I know it's coming along. Can't wait to see that come to life. So, so for me, it's one of those things that you see the flat, and Miss Williams has been there pretty much since day one, and trying to see that thing come to life. So it's great to see new things in our park still coming about. So thank you for that. That's all I have. I'll save my other comments for Thursday. Next item is staff comments and business. I will call on staff to make specific reports. I'll start first of all on the COVID-19 expenditures and revenue. Mr. Stewart.
Okay, well, we may want to consider dropping the COVID-19 part of it because that program ended as of December 31st unless we get a new allocation. We did wind up expending and receiving reimbursement for all of our allocation. But as you can see, our January sales tax are up, sales tax receipts are up 10,000 over previous year. Our property tax is up about 80,000 over previous year. Our water and sewer billing is down a bit, a couple $1,000s, but again, that could be fluctuations in billing cycles and so forth. But overall, we continue to be in a very good financial position compared to a year ago.
So quick question, Steve, for me, particularly on the water sewer side. Looks like the billing fluctuates, and I'm trying to, this is only a, year over year review. I guess, were there any anomalies that you saw year over year versus, say, 3 years or 5 years on water sewer? Is this, you know, consistent, for example, July, you know, year over year, usually a little bit down, August a little bit up, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think it has more to do with just some months, you may be 3 or 4 days late in reading the bills, and then, so you have a short month and then a long month afterwards, or vice versa. I'm not, can't recall any specific anomalies right now of why 1 month would be, you know, outrageous. Sometimes that happens on the sewer side of it if you have a major rain event, and we have a lot of I&I, as you well know, and so our sewer bills are way up. So that could affect that, but as far as specifics, I can't really point to anything at this time.
Any questions for Mr. Sheehan? All right, we'll move on over to the update on General Statute 160D. I believe Mr. Wells is going to handle that. You got about 5 minutes to tell us exactly everything that's the update on that.
Thank you, Mayor. It should take me a lot less than 5 minutes.
Okay.
As we, I think I've reported to you in the past, just as a reminder, revisions in the state planning and zoning statutes that occurred approximately 2 years ago require local cities, towns, and counties to align their codes and ordinances pertaining to planning and zoning with the new state statutes. There is a deadline for doing so of July 1st of 2021. The town contracted with the Central Iowa Council of Governments to provide professional consulting services to us to review and evaluate our ordinances, particularly our UDO, to recommend or prescribe changes to our ordinances to bring them into compliance with 160D. We continue to make progress along those lines. Preliminarily, I would like to bring recommended changes to the UDO to the Planning and Zoning Board for their review in March, and then bring them to the town board during the month of April. So those are my target dates to bring this forward, to bring us into compliance. I think we're in pretty good shape along those lines.
Okay, great. Look forward to those changes and comments, and I'm sure probably quite a few updates to that, but look forward to that in March or April.
John, I think you did make one of your comments. You made
Decided to start a game.
I'm so sorry.
You made notation that the fact that we have a strategic plan kind of helped us in reviewing our UDO and bringing it up to current code under the chapter 60, 60D, or 160D, whatever. That was a big help that our relatively recently passed strategic plan.
That was an observation that the staff at Central Iowa made, was that we are in a relatively good position compared to a lot of the other cities and towns because our UDO is relatively young, being just about 2 years old. Exactly.
Okay, next item is an update regarding 117 Troutman Road. That's the Dallas Norman property. Mr. Wells?
Thank you again, Mayor. As you may recall, at, I believe it was the December meeting, I was pleased to report to the board that the property owner had completed the perimeter landscaping plan, plantings that were prescribed in a perimeter landscaping plan that the board approved. I believe it was at the October meeting. At that same meeting, the board empowered me to act on behalf of the town to release Mr. Norman from his 5 years of not being able to obtain permits and approvals for improvements to his property. Since the completion of those plantings approximately 2 months ago, I continued to work with Mr. Norman and his site engineer on developing a plan for making improvements to the remainder of his site. Keep in mind that the original plan that you reviewed back in the fall was only for the perimeter plantings and screenings, whereas there were a number of issues pertaining to parking in driveways and screening from the street right-of-way that needed to be addressed, that he was out of compliance with. Approximately 2 weeks ago, I received a revised site plan for proposed or intended improvements on the remainder of the site that I felt were in substantial compliance with the UDO, and I did issue a letter to Mr. Norman and his engineer approving that site on behalf of the town and releasing him from not being able to obtain permits. So I am cautiously optimistic that we're on the right path with this. It will bear further monitoring as he proceeds to complete those remaining outstanding improvements, but I'm feeling pretty good that we're going in the right direction.
Now, to answer your question, you have gone ahead and issued a letter of release.
Yes.
Obviously, under the dependability that he will be an honorable man and live up to the agreement.
And if he doesn't, we have our code compliance authority that hopefully we won't have to enact, but we do have that authority under the UDO in the event that he doesn't.
So, in his plan in October, he, and I asked you this, I think in December, he was supposed to plant deciduous trees, hardwood trees, and did he plant any?
He planted I don't remember the exact number, but it was in excess of 300 trees and shrubs in accordance with that plan that y'all had looked at back in the fall, yes.
Well, he was gonna plant some evergreens, but he was gonna plant hardwoods too, plus the shrubs.
Well, whatever he had planted was in compliance with that.
Okay.
Now, he did acknowledge that given the huge number of trees that he had committed himself to plant, that he had to accept certain changes in the exact precise species that were ended up being planted. But I was mostly concerned with, quite honestly, the number, the variety, and the size and the placement of that, the plantings, more so than the exact species of the plants.
Okay.
Other questions regarding 117 trackside? That takes us to, it's hard reading this one, the potential goat ordinance update. Wells.
On a slightly lighter topic. I believe it was at the November or December council meeting, this topic was discussed, and it has somewhat expanded in scope and scale a little bit since then, and I'll talk about that in a second or two, but at the time, Council directed me to bring the topic up with our Planning and Zoning Committee to allow them the opportunity to weigh in on the matter of allowing under certain prescribed circumstances the use of goats for grazing of invasive vegetative species within the town limits. Due to a variety of different factors, not the least of which has been the pandemic, the Planning and Zoning Board hasn't met since the month of October, but we did manage to meet remotely during the month of January, so I had the opportunity to talk to the board about this, and so I did. Let me get back to the issue of expanding of the scope and scale a little bit. In addition to the issue of goat grazing, the town, and I think at least one or two council members have been approached by a citizen asking whether there was any value in also considering an ordinance that would allow goats to be kept as domestic pets. So I added that as a kind of a second issue that was closely related to the goat grazing issue. We have also been receiving here in Town Hall occasional calls about the town's position on keeping of horses within the town limits. There was, after doing a little bit of research, it became apparent to me that there is a bit of a contradiction between what appears in the UDO and what appears in the Code of Ordinances with regard to the keeping of horses. So I added that as a third topic. Given that, I brought all three of those topics to the attention of the Planning and Zoning Committee. And I allowed them the opportunity to kind of do a roundtable discussion on those three topics. And what I presented to you in your agenda package here is kind of a synopsis of that discussion. There were about 5 different major themes that the board concentrated in on. I'm presenting these to you for your consideration tonight. One of the questions or the issues that had been raised was whether our peer communities in Iredell County had comparable ordinances, particularly regarding the issue of goats. I did do a little bit of research on that afterward, and both Mooresville and Statesville do defer to the county animal control agency and their animal control ordinance, and neither has a specific ordinance within their town codes of ordinances to deal with the issue of goats. The Planning and Zoning Board also felt that if we were to establish some sort of guidelines or requirements for the keeping of horses or goats, the number of animals should be tied into the acreage of the property upon which they're to be kept. I have established a working relationship with Cooperative Extension at NC State, and they've been a lot of help in giving me some guidance and direction on what those acreages might look like in the event that we do go in that direction. The board also talked a bit about some parameters that we might want to establish in terms of making sure that the property is properly fenced. There are sanitary conditions that would be maintained, and that there would be some kind of enforcement ordinance that we could enact in the event that the situation either becomes unhealthy for the animal or unsanitary for the surrounding community. They also suggested that the ordinances probably more belong in the code of ordinances and not in the UDO. I think that's something that we've discussed in the past as well. So anyway, that basically is where we stand right now on the issue of goats and horses.
Okay, so, let's start with your last comment first. Seems like it makes sense for, rather than this being in the UDO, it be in the code of ordinances. Does anybody on the council disagree with that? So if council agrees, can you bring that back? Mr. White, figure out where that needs to go in our code, and we can go from there.
I can take a run at that, sure.
But I only agree for grazing. I don't think we should be harboring animal livestock in town.
Well, I'm going back to that.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with that one piece of it.
Yeah, so on the point of, do we have, I guess, horses, and is this, my question is really specifically around Iredell County, animal control within a municipality. The states where more will specifically talk about horses and goats, or do they talk about other types of livestock? And what is the, I guess, trigger within their municipal ordinances that talks about how animal control will handle it?
Good question, Mayor. My understanding is neither and I haven't gone through those ordinances. I've just, touched base with staffs from both of those towns, cities. My understanding is their local ordinances are pretty silent on the issue of the harboring of those animals within their town limits. The county animal control ordinance more deals with issues of sanitation and health and of the animals, more so than how many goats or chickens you can keep per acre or whatever. They don't get into that granular type of regulation. I also noticed in the county animal control ordinance, there is a requirement for, and you may already know this, but I just learned this last week from looking at that ordinance, that there's a requirement for, in order for it to become in effect within individual towns and cities within Iredell County, there has to be I think it's a memorandum of understanding or an ordinance or a resolution passed by the municipal board in order to enact it. It isn't automatic. It isn't automatically in effect. It has to, in effect, the county needs to be directed or requested to have it in effect within that. And as far as I know, that hadn't happened here in Troutman, so.
Statesville basically just restricts any hoofed animals in their ordinances. Mooresville is a little bit different in that it allows certain animals in certain conditions. But Statesville prohibits hoofed animals in their city limits altogether.
Now, again, my understanding from reading your information back, Iredell County, if this memorandum were agreed to, if they would only enforce county regulations. If we had anything, shall I say, particular or peculiar to Troutman, it would be Troutman's responsibility.
That is correct.
Right.
That is correct.
Right. Well, are you finished, or I was gonna make a comment, but only if you're finished.
No, I'm done.
Okay, I was just gonna say that I was the person that gave sent a note to Jonathan when I had been contacted, and I think one other council person had been contacted, to check into that about the pets. There was no endorsement on my part whatsoever. It was just to look into it and see what you think and see what the P and Z thinks. So, I want to make sure that that's, you know, and so, of course, I'm looking to P and Z and to, staff to advise on that. You know, obviously I have a little bit of a situation with the pet 2 part as opposed to the original intent, which was just, you know, maybe a couple times a year, grazing, you know, nuisance vegetation, you know, bringing goats in or some other livestock that would eat vegetation, and that was it. I do know that, and I think up until our last UDO, we did allow horses in Troutman under certain circumstances, because I think we had a person over on Lind Street that had a horse for years, going back years. So that's something to consider as opposed to goats. And again, just making a statement, not making an endorsement or anything. If we did want to allow some species of livestock as a pet, as opposed to allowing a goat or something else of that similar nature. So these are things that I'm just throwing out. And well, let me ask you now, planning and zoning, in your discussion, and I apologize that I was not able to join you on Zoom the night they met, but what was their feelings, what were their feelings as far as, you know, the pet situation and breaking it down, and as you did too, including the horse versus the goat as a pet, or no pets at all, and then just, you know, allowing a goat or not allowing a goat at all to handle nuisance vegetation 2 or 3 times a year, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. There was very little discussion about other types of animals, except one notable, and it was kind of as a postscript to the conversation, so I didn't put it in my summary here. One of the board members, and I've forgotten which one it was, mentioned alpacas. And, you know, well, if we allow goats, will there be somebody who will want to keep an alpaca? And I don't know a lot about alpacas other than last year I worked for about 3 months up in the town of Harrisburg, and I know that right out on the edge of town, somebody had some acreage there. I don't remember how large, but it was a few acres around a home, and I think they had a barn or something. And they had a herd of alpacas out there, so I was a little familiar with what an alpaca is. I don't know how gentle or how aggressive they are, or whether they eat kudzu or not, but the consensus among the board members, in answer to your question, Mr. Hinkle, was let's just deal with the horses and goats before we go to other types of animals. So that's how they suggested this be handled at this time.
Have you looked in our old UDO under the keeping of livestock?
I have not, no.
Okay, because it was pretty extensive in there. And it mentions quite a few different kinds of livestock. Domestic fowl, cows, sheep, hogs, pigs, swine, which I don't know what the difference between those 3 are, but goats, horses, mules, and other livestock may be kept within the corporate limits of the town of Troutman with the following provisions. Anybody with any knowledge of the larger animals knows, and I think you mentioned an acre, it takes at least 2 acres to sustain a horse.
Right.
And 1 additional acre for each additional horse. So I don't think there's many places in the corporate limits if we put stipulations that it must be for and there's not many animals that doesn't have hooves, and then there's other stipulations. It had to be 150 feet from the next residence, it had to be 150 feet from the road, and different things. And I personally don't think anybody and everybody's gonna go out and buy a horse or a cow or a pig or anything. But I personally don't see the problem with it either. And I understand with the vegetation and with kudzu especially, and my little goat was finicky. She was a finicky little thing. She wouldn't eat English ivy, which normally goats would eat, anything like that. She wouldn't eat briars. She's very finicky. She's just like grass. But, and I don't see a problem with having a goat as a pet to help. Like in this one, citizens, it takes a lot to kill kudzu. Just having one come in 2 or 3 times a year for 1 or 2 weeks ain't gonna kill kudzu. That's just my opinion.
A DuPont makes a real good herbicide that will.
Well, I
It'll hit
don't
my
think
picture.
they want to do, any chemicals.
Yeah, that was one of the things she said.
All right, so, in order to give staff some recommendations here, it sounds like there are a couple of options. One is that we, don't allow, if it's like hood animals inside the city limits. Number 2 would be that we, allow, specifically either goats and horses and or hooved animals inside the city limits with, some type of acreage requirement as, recommended by, P&Z. And I guess third would be, that you allow goats and horses and or other hooved animals, period.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
as council members, did you all get any grievances or pushback under the old UDO? Was there any complaints or issues with that, the way it was written?
Somehow it disappeared. What was the?
Once it changed to the new UDO, it was supposed to go to the Code of Ordinances. It's my understanding in speaking with the old planner, that the people who changed that said that it would be more appropriate if it was worded to the Code of Ordinances instead of UDO, and her replacement transition, it never got done, is my understanding.
Which is why I was recommended the first thing to deal with this, that it go to Code of Ordinance.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir.
So,
But if you all didn't get a lot of complaints or pushback or grievances, that would be my recommendation to you all, is allow Jonathan and I to review it. And unless there's major heartburn, if you all didn't get complaints or pushback, let us look at that. We'll send it to Gary for review. And if he don't have any issues, let us bring that back to you all for consideration.
or the Code of Ordinances.
Yes, sir.
If I may, yeah, you're right, no. To answer your question, no. I was not aware, the whole time I was on council before. There may have been some, but if there were, they may have been minor, because I never really heard of them. And I think, with the, restrictions that we put in the old, ordinance, UDO, whatever handled it before, this most recent revision, certainly was adequate, and that was the plan. In coming up with those, we did revise them several times over the years, and we were trying to come up with something that as the town grew, it would not become a problem. And I think we succeeded, and I think we can continue to succeed with certain reasonable restrictions. Looking at the old code before we revised it in 1920, 1919, whatever, or 2019, excuse me. But at any rate, I agree, what you're saying, to do that, but again, I'll just answer your question, no, and I think if we continue that course, it would be reasonable, with reasonable regulations.
Anybody opposed to having, staff bring back a recommendation for, us to include this in our Code of Ordinances based on the prior UDO?
I'm opposed to it. I just don't, shouldn't have livestock in town. I just disagree with it. I did agree at the Wicker House, and she made the issue about not wanting to use chemicals to kill everything, or if you have somebody cutting it back, like the guy across the street killed it all out of his yard. It took him a while to do it, then over time he got it out of there, and then he didn't have goats. And but I said, I could agree that if somebody was bringing them in, that person had to be more than one, obviously, but that person be control level. And they bring them in and eat stuff up here for over a week or 2 weeks, whatever it is, then they take them away, and they maintain it here. And I was okay with that. And when she said the note, like she said to him, I've basically just totally ignored it from there, because I told her back then that I would not agree with that. But like I say, it'd be goats now, then the alpacas, or llamas, or somebody might want a giraffe, I don't know.
Well, there's some animals you can't get, that's not allowed to have as pets.
And if we live in city limits, we probably shouldn't have livestock, it has to be out in the farmland, we've got plenty of farmland around.
Mayor, ordinance can be drafted that just, section A would say no livestock of any kind. And then section B would be an exception like the goats for temporary use. And that's probably how it would be drafted.
So let me ask this, rather than us making a decision on it, can you all get together, bring us back the options that we talked about? Again, for me, option A is that we take the old ordinance, or take what was in the UDO, bring that back, maybe with some tweaks or changes. I think, the latter piece is really what, Gary just said, which is, this is an ordinance with this exception, no livestock with the exception of goats for grazing or what have you.
We absolutely can craft it just as Gary said, and then you all can strike out whatever word, whether it be a goat or an ape or a giraffe or whatever, but yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
They're not hooked, so they would make it, but anyway.
That's right. Yeah, if it's missing a thumb, it can't be there, yeah.
I would suggest that there's a third piece of that, and that is, whatever we draft, we need to make sure that it's not internally contradictory. In other words, if there's something in the code of ordinances that's being prescribed or suggested, wherever in the UDO is a comparable citation that may need to be adjusted or at least considered for adjustment to make it consistent with whatever we're considering. And I think the horse situation is a good example of where that evidently wasn't done.
Well, and I guess for me, I would hope that anything that is livestock related that's in the UDO would be referred back to the code of ordinance.
Right.
I think in new UDO, it specifically says no livestock, doesn't it?
I think so, yeah, I think you're
I
right.
think it does.
It's at a minimum of 10 acres, and it's subject to a special use permit.
Right.
So it is pretty restrictive.
So it does, under very restrictive circumstances, allow at least for a horse. Okay.
And we would leave that out so it does not conflict.
I'll let you guys figure out how to make sure that that doesn't happen. All right. All right, next item is the overview of our upcoming regular meeting on February 11th. Mr. Watt?
As you all have the draft before you, the only thing is I said that's different there is I have the Walker family that would join us, and at that time we would also recognize our mayor and council lady Harris. That's pretty much it. Any questions about the agenda?
Would you put that, like a new, it would be definitely, I guess, a new number? It would either be 7 or 8?
I had numbers, yeah, so you gotta add both. You would add 8.
I would like to, if that's okay with you all.
At first I thought 8C, but that says 8 is recognition of Troutman police officers. Could you just?
So you want to put it at the front, at the top of that, as 8,
Okay.
and change the other numbers? So-
So I'd like to make it 8 and then just let the other numbers change if it's all right with you all. do have, the appointments that are there on our boards.
Mr. Manager, could I ask you to, unless you're, I don't mean to be jumping ahead of you, but could you go over item 15, capital outlay for the public works truck? Explain that a little bit to us?
Yes, sir. What is there, and I've got Adam here to explain also, for one of the two, but the public works vehicles, he has a vehicle, and looking at the budget year and the way the bids works, he has one vehicle, and I don't remember the exact mileage that Randy's driving. Is it 130 or 150?
He's got 135 on right now.
The vehicle's already had a couple repairs, like a seat needed to be replaced because the springs that was in it. And based off of our budget and where it was and talking with Steve Shealy, the bids come out pretty aggressive this year. When we checked on the bid amounts for Dodge trucks in particular, we checked with all the major powerhouses, Ford, Chevrolet, and Dodge. Hilderton,
I believe it is.
they get me from mispronouncing that company. Is the bid contractor, even in checking with the local ones that we have referred to in the past, the bids were about $4,000 higher. So the bids were pretty aggressive in where we could get a four-wheel drive plain truck with no frills. The only add that we added to it was a 7-pin wiring harness and a tow package, class 4 tow package, because it pulls trailers on there. It was just a little over $24,000 for the truck, which was a pretty aggressive thing. The other thing that we found out was the red truck that we drive is not, it's not safe. It has right at 300,000 miles or a little over, actually.
We're not sure. We think the gauge cluster's been replaced. We think it's got about 360 on it. So.
What you say, I can't hear you.
We think the gauge cluster's been replaced. On our computer, it's showing 360. On that gauge cluster, it's showing like 260. So we don't know where it's at, but it's definitely a liability for anybody driving it.
That truck has some issues, and they had to make some expenditures to get it to where it is drivable. North Carolina is what we call a no-fault state, to where if you're involved in an accident, if you're 1% fault, then the other side don't have to pay. So my concern as a manager is Paxton or Emily or any other staff member for that matter can be driving that truck down the road, minding their own business. But because of those things on a regular basis, going out and this code having to be replaced, or that EGR valve going bad or whatever, constantly it's having to go back and something be replaced, a safety issue. And if that's the day one of them's driving it and it's bad, and it's having to happen on a every other week basis, it seems that something's having to get repaired on it. If that's the day that something's going bad and we know that it's having to get almost bi-weekly repairs, if somebody ran a stop sign and hit one of them and God forbid they got hurt bad or worse, even death, then we know that vehicle is that bad off, and it makes us liable that it's that 1% fault of ours. So to me, it's a liability for us to be driving that truck, and for the price that they are, and for these govdeals.com prices that you can see what they're getting on trade-in value. And I talked with Steve Shealy at these prices. He suggested that if we've got to replace the red vehicle, and especially with the funds being earmarked the way they are, for like Adam's side of his truck at $24,000 for his budget, instead of waiting until the summertime when they're up with the rebates that are out there and the bid that we got, we decided to come to you, one, as a liability factor for red, two, He's got to replace that vehicle anyway. The budget that just came back last month is an audit report, you all seen, I'm sorry, month before last, that we would go ahead and get to it this time, and that's my request to you all. I'll be glad to answer any questions more than that, but that's the explanation for both trucks.
Yeah, I'm well familiar with the red truck, so, you know, you kind of confirmed what I think I already knew, but, I was not aware of the other one that Randy drives, and, again, just questioning, but, yeah, I'm fine.
And I'm sure that Emily would agree that we appreciate Duck taking charge of that, because that truck is it's not a good feeling to drive that truck, so.
That's one we kind of inherited, if you
Yes,
know what I mean.
we did, and kind of was gonna use it like for a year and then get rid of it, and it just kind of stayed with us, so, yeah.
Okay, I got you.
But at the cost of replacing them new versus what we can sell the other ones on govdeals.com for, to me, why kick the can down the road when we can go ahead and replace them at the value we are? Plus, we're trying to clean up from down at maintenance, there's an old red, is that a snapper thing? And a couple other things that we are trying to surplus. I've already asked the PD to go through, there's some evidence vehicles that's been sitting around for 4 and 5 years. I have expedited their process of getting rid of those vehicles so that we can try to reclaim some of the funds that we're hoping to expend there. But we're trying to be frugal with the taxpayer dollars. It's not just go out and buy them because we can.
Thanks.
I stand for any other questions on the trucks?
Yeah, Mr. White, one thing, one of the things that we've gotten in the past is an inventory of vehicles. Can you provide us that inventory of all of our vehicles? You may not be able to do it by Thursday, but maybe by at least our next meeting.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
The other thing I was gonna make you all aware of, we've got a couple board of appointments that are coming up. We do and did ask the individuals to come here. One is an ABC board appointment, and their person, Kim, is out there. We also have two board of adjustments appointments, and they are out there. We have asked that those folks come here. If you would like to meet them, I'll be glad to ask them to come inside so that you all can meet them. You would like for me to have them come in now?
Yeah. Everybody know they've got 30 minutes each.
30 minutes? Yes, sir, Mayor. Yes.
Yeah, really.
Also, on Thursday, we have Emily that has the
Put just the policies, if there were any questions.
the
about
policies that she's got coming up. The Town of Troutman naming rights policy. We went over that, the ESC Park baseball fields and rules and regulations, and the Troutman Farmer Market rules and guidelines. Can she go over those real quick?
If there's any questions, if there's not, then,
Y'all got them in your packets.
I just had one question.
sure,
Or comment.
yeah.
As a parent, I was reading the one about the ball field,
Yes.
and I saw where it was talking about, it mentioned, no profanity and no, responsible, like, I don't know if we need to on there, but I think we need to, at some point, some place, clarify that this is not just for the players, it's for the parents as well. Because we just need to make sure everybody is complying with that. And I also wanted to know, is this going to be on some type of either semi-permanent or, permanent signage out there? Or how will they know what the rules are?
So just like we have in our, on our main park rules, it'll be on multiple signs on both fields, and then it'll be on a substantial size sign front and center for the whole complex. So it'll be in multiple places. But I can definitely change the wording to say both players and parents. I can,
Spectators or whatever, some kind of
Yep.
word to.
I can change that wording to clarify that, but it'll be,
Spectators maybe instead
Yep.
of parents.
Well,
Are you talking about the one
I
that
can
says
change
no
that.
foul language?
Yes.
It
You could-
doesn't
you could give
specify,
foul
it
mouth
just says no
grandpa, too.
foul language or unsportsmanlike behavior, you will
And-
be asked to leave.
And based off of where the signs will be posted, it's not just in the dugout, that's for everybody entering the fields. And I do understand your concern as a coach and everything, but based off of where the signs will be placed, I respectfully don't think it's not gonna be just for the players, and quite frankly, it'll be posted more for the parents instead of just the players.
Yeah.
Well, it
Yeah.
probably needs to be a consistent similar signs that also can be put in other places in the park. So is that a similar sign that can be posted, for example, under the shelter? Or,
The no profanity part, or
right,
I couldn't have signs made
yeah.
that say
So
that.
I think there's some other signage that we have, for example, tobacco and all that sort of thing in the park. And again, maybe it's something that we can do consistently, so that same type of signage can be posted other places. So again, we got soccer fields and similar things going on, but how do we make sure that that same language is consistent throughout the park?
Okay. So, do you want me to revamp that language there, or?
Ron is saying he doesn't think we need to because of where it's gonna be, it'll be obvious that it's for everybody. I think that's what you're saying, right, Ron?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it'll meet you when you pull into the complex, and then they'll be at each field. But I can definitely say this is for everyone. I can change that language, so it's clear. And then I can get some other signs made for the other amenities at the park as well. No problem, I can do that.
When I read over them, I didn't take that as that particular language pertaining to the players. I took it as to everyone.
I think they're saying it's
And to the mayor's point, once we make them universal throughout, I think it gets it, just rebrand the whole place.
Is that why y'all saying leave the language as is, that it pertains?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's probably fine if Ms. Harris is okay with it, because
Oh.
again, if we cover the park with the same language, it applies to, doesn't matter where you're at, right? So if you're under the shelter, you're in the dog park, or you're playing soccer, these are the rules of the park. And so again, to me, that would make sense.
Okay.
It can be the people with the pig in the dog park.
That's right. And then there's that.
Yes, I'm fine with that. That
Okay.
So, and since Ms. Harris stole one of my questions, my other question was around, number 10, if only game personnel are allowed in dugout or on fields. If, let's say a coach or somebody wants to come and practice, for example, it's not a game day, could they be allowed on the fields to do that?
Yeah, they're a part of the game, so they're a participating member of the game. That just keeps mom and dad out from hanging out in the dugouts.
Again, not on a game day, just like right now, there's no game going on, could they go out there and practice with their
Sure, if
kids?
it's not reserved. If it's not reserved, yeah.
Yeah, I understand your question, Mayor, and like Emily's saying, when it's not a team event,
Right.
if we want to take our children out there, absolutely.
Okay.
That's a good point, because it is at the middle school, I see them out there all the time,
Yeah.
on the field, for the parents and the kids. Yeah.
Is everybody else good with the rest of those policies?
And I haven't gone through the, fully gone through the farmer's market, but was there,
The only updates to that were that the product must be grown by you, not purchased and resold. So you're not going to Food Line and buying tomatoes and turn around and reselling them. We laugh, but it's happened, so
I could be okay with that. I won't
I'm sure you could be.
On the
That goes
radio
back to
station
a
today, I
certain
talked about.
provider down in Morganville, so that goes back to even Ms. Martin's time.
Yeah,
of
so,
editing that. Yeah, you're right.
right, so we needed to update that. We also included some communication information in there, just phone numbers, emails, and how we're gonna communicate with the vendors to streamline that, and then the approved products for sale. Instead of putting that on a separate form, we just put it all in there together, so. But there were so many updates, instead of updating our policy from before, we had to rename it with a new policy number, so. That's really all the changes for that one. And the facility naming rights is just the process for consideration. I don't know if there were any questions with that one, but that wasn't just strictly Parks and Rec, that was all town facilities. So I don't know if there were any questions there, but just the guiding principles and information, the application and how to modify one. So if there's any questions with that. And then the ordinance 1917 was the modification of how many officers are required for a special event. We took the restrictions off of that and left it open-ended. So if we needed to require 4 for every 250 people, we have the right to do so. If we need to require 10, we have the right to do so. And then we added the information around aviation for a drone policy. So that's just the...
We spoke about that one a good bit, just FYI. We felt like that was to protect the occupants, especially the children in our park system, from people flying aircraft around and taking pictures unnecessarily or uninvitedly. There are several facilities and municipalities throughout the state and country that have enacted these policies. It just gives protection that a lot of people don't necessarily think about. But for us, especially in our ball fields, we saw the potential danger there, and I appreciate the hard work that went into the research for that. But we feel like that gives the town the ultimate protection of people flying aircraft without permission and special events or law enforcement doing it for specific purposes.
So this is a question that came up some time ago. Did we, or is it in our code of ordinances in terms of flying drones within the town limits?
So while we can't, I can answer it because I feel like I've read up to my ears in drones. So while we can't control or mandate airspace, FAA is the only ones who can control that.
Correct.
We can only control what we own, and that's our property. So the launch and recovery on town property is what we can mandate. So you could launch a drone from the next door property and fly it over, and there's really not much we could do with that, but we can only control the launch and recovery on park property. So, and we did allow in that ordinance for special permits. So, and that would allow for law enforcement if they needed to use a drone for a recovery or a search project, or if we wanted to allow for a special event, if we wanted to allow for photography, or if someone were doing a special project, and we do get that request often. So we did allow for that in the clause. So like we've had special events where we wanted pictures taken, or like ESC did some special projects, they needed some aerial shots of their, so we do allow for that there. But we can't control if someone next door wants to take a drone and fly over. We would never be able to enforce that. But.
And that's just like aircraft flying commercial passengers. We can't control all airspace, and this falls under that same guideline.
Yeah. Okay.
But we can control.
Yeah.
Now, I understand under the special events where alcohol may be served, under the old policy, I believe it was required to have a police officer. And I see now with either you and or town manager, y'all can waive that if you feel like it's appropriate in the circumstance not to even have a police officer there if alcohol is being served versus, when you feel that one is required.
Yes, sir. Under the old one, it said with or without alcohol, 2 officers for every 250 people are required.
Right. And I think I read here where y'all have that option of waiving that to where you can still serve alcohol and not have any police officers if you feel it's not needed.
And we would never do that. The only events that are allowed to serve alcohol are town events.
Right.
And so if we did have alcohol there, of course, we'd have it staffed with officers. But more what this policy was revised for along the lines of a March of Dimes event where they might have 250 people or 260 people. We don't need 4 officers down there walking around. So it just kind of gives, the police department a little bit of leeway to say, that event doesn't need 4 police officers to stand down there and roam around for, 2 hours because they have 260 people. So just gives a little bit of leeway. But no events are allowed to have alcohol other than town-sponsored events with a third party. So.
And there's quite frankly certain events, as we discussed, that it's going to require more officers. If Adam Lippard's gonna have a birthday party, then he's gotta have 5 officers. But if the mayor's gonna have a birthday party, then we don't need to have an officer.
So you or Emily would have the authority then to mandate more if necessary. if you feel
14,
necessary.
yes, sir, and we would err on that side more so
Right.
than not enough.
The way the policy's written, it allows the designee to determine that. Has nothing to do with, well, there's several factors that go in there that are not defined, that allows you to make that decision. That allows us to make that decision.
Last question, Emily, on the naming rights, I'll go back to that just real quick. Maybe it doesn't, I might have missed it, so will the application serve as the agreement with the individual and or organization? And should that have some legal review? So what I mean by that, if there is a request for a naming right, you know, Mr. Hinkle wants to name, you know, a building after his family, will there be some type of agreement with him and his family of what that naming right is outside the application?
I lost the last part of that.
So if, again, I think the application is there for somebody to recommend or request a naming rights. Is there like an agreement after that is approved? Again.
Oh, to extend to him, yes.
Extend to him, so that it says, and some of these provisions in here that also speak to, if there is some reason that we need to revoke that, as you have spelled out here, the town reserves the right to do that.
There should be there should be a document drafted that outlines what the agreement, there should be.
You're talking about it, kind of what I'm gonna call the Jerry Richardson effect.
Thank you.
Okay,
Say that.
gotcha,
Yes.
okay. I checked for that, yeah, there's, I saw something that I interpreted to allow them to do that, yes.
But I think there has to be.
Yeah, there does.
I think it covers the provisions in here, but the actual document that would be extended in that
To the-
situation
yeah.
also needs to accompany to say that's what the town will have. And if I've gotta come back to you and say, hey, we're gonna revoke that, regardless of who's here, anybody can pick that document up and say, hey, you know, based on these, you know, issues, we're gonna revoke that naming right.
We did have that clause, I don't know that we had.
Well, we have the guiding principles and the, what gets you there, but we don't have a contract for what keeps you there. And so that's what we need to establish.
Okay,
So let me pull that together and I'll,
we'll have it by Thursday.
yeah, I'll send it before now. Do you want me to do that? Send it between now and then, or? I'll bring it Thursday. Yep, thank you for that. I didn't even think about that.
We did have the discussion, but yeah, we'll add the piece of paper. Anything else?
I was gonna, real quick, what's the latest on the fencing situation with Lowe's?
Oh,
There's
we've
something
had
like that.
many in-depth discussions.
Many,
and
many,
many promises from them. I couldn't tell you how many times they told Emily it would be done, and I'm not trying to speak for her, she's sitting here. But that was supposed to have been done 3 Saturdays. This Saturday it will be done. and we was told it would be done this past Saturday, and I said, look, as Emily has told them also, we're not asking for false promises, we're asking for a quality job. And I expressed to them that just like our pre-agendas and paperwork is sent to you all, the council, that it makes it look bad when she puts it in a report and tells you all based off of their promises, something's gonna be done, and then that's released to the media, that the media then reports it as fact, because that's our paperwork. And we report our paperwork based off of what somebody told us. And then it makes them look bad, but importantly, it makes us look bad because we're reporting what was told to us, to you all. And basically they apologized and said they're real sorry And I asked them, what guarantees did we have and how could they put that in writing with whose blood did they wanted to put that in? And they started stuttering. Adam was sitting there and heard them, and they started stuttering. So they actually had extra people there today working when Emily and I went to show some other folks around some work that we're entertaining. And all we can tell you at this point, unless Emily's got additional things she would like to inject, is they're promising still, but the work is progressing more so in the last week and a half than we have in the last 2 months. And that's as straightforward as I know to tell you. Do you have anything to add?
I don't. That's it.
And let me add this caveat. Our local people have always been outstanding to us in our relationship with them. But this particular project went above our local people and got bidded out to other non-local people. So I do want to stress, our local people that we have dealt with have been nothing but good to this town and good to us with everything that they've ever did with us. But this particular deal, once it left that local relationship of people that we talk to on a regular basis and see in our community, we wound up just like a number. But
Want me to get the folks out here?
yes, ma'am, and they did apologize and tell us that by Thursday we would be done.
Well, I knew in the past we'd had a good relationship with them, and I was just surprised to read, and hear about this fencing situation with Lowe's. I just, was very surprised it was taking that long.
And as he said, at the local level, they were great, but we were not aware that they weren't aware of the situation. So by the time they became aware of it, they said, "Why didn't you tell us?" And we said, "Well, we thought you were aware that it was," and they weren't. And so,
Council, this is Kim. She is the ABC board appointee. Amir said you had an hour to talk about yourself and don't waste no time and use the whole hour. No, he said 30 minutes. He said 30 minutes.
I said 30 minutes. The requirement is you take all 30.
Oh, and then, you can go ahead and stand in front of the podium. I forgot, Tim.
All right.
But do tell everybody a little bit about yourself, please, ma'am.
I'm Kim Cavan. I moved to Troutman in '94 when I got married, and I've lived here on Wagner Street since then. I grew up in Mooresville. I work at Lake Norman Pediatrics, which is now Navant Health Pediatrics Lake Norman, in downtown Mooresville. I've been there for 29 years. The clinic administrator for the office. And I've volunteered at different, church. My church is Prospect Presbyterian in Mooresville. I've been a member of that since I was born. I've served on the Christian Education Committee and the Fellowship Committee. And that's pretty much it. Do y'all have any questions?
Are they going to excommunicate you for being on the ABC board?
No. No.
Was that Presbyterian, Baptist?
Prospect Presbyterian.
Okay, all right.
Seriously though, why do you want to be on the ABC board?
Well, I've seen that it seems to look like it's a fairly profitable store, as busy as it looks, and I would just like to make sure that it continues to be that way and grow and continue to bring more business and revenue to the county.
Excuse me. Plus, we have a vacancy, it would be treasurer, right? Is that correct?
You have a question?
I do.
Now?
What's your opinion on the future store in the future in the Troutman town limits for our ABC board?
I think if it would continue to be profitable, that second location would even be more profitable, and I would think that would be something that we should look forward to in the future.
So your vision is expansion?
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Next is Lee Geiger.
Good afternoon, board. My name is Lee Geiger. I moved here in 2004, so I've been in Troutman for 17 years. And I'm married. I got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old little girl. She'll be going to Troutman Elementary next year. And self-employed. I currently live on Autumn Leaf Road. I've lived there since '04. And looking to get involved in the community.
And I failed to mention, he is for the Board of Adjustments in the exterior position as an alternate, is the position that it would be.
For the
ETJ.
Yep.
What is your business?
It's LMG Motorsports and Fabrication. So I used to do race cars years ago and transitioning out of that, so it's metal fabrication and collision repair and restorations.
Lee, what do you see via, considering the kind of flavor that we're trying to paint here in the town, what do you see as a vision that you would have for our town?
Well, expansion in a responsible manner. So everything, we want the town to be beautiful, keep the small town feel, but yet you have to grow or you go out. You know, so you have to work together with everybody to try and get the expansion. As you guys know, on Autumn Leaf Road, I mean, it's really expanding. There's lots of things to consider between the traffic and and the sidewalks and everything you gotta put in to take care of all the things that the people are gonna need in the community also.
Lee, I know you got your own business, and I'm sure you can come and go as you see fit. So I'm presuming that, the meetings being held at 4 o'clock in the afternoon would not be a problem
No.
for you.
No, that's one good thing, definitely about being self-employed. I have the freedom to attend the meetings. Correct.
Other questions for Lee? Thank you.
Before he leaves, and I should have said this before Kim left, but thank you each and every one of you for taking the opportunity to apply and commit to the town and be a part of the town. We certainly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Yes, sir.
I'm good. Then we have Jerry Austin. We'll get yours first. And he is the interim Board of Adjustments position that is on. And of course, he was here last month and you all saw him then. Jerry?
Good to see everybody again. Some faces here that weren't here last time, but Jerry Auctioner, moved here with my wife Fiona in Barium Seasons, 5 going on 6 years ago now, somewhere in there. Have one small girl, she's 2.5, and then another boy that's on the way. So just found out last week. I told the wife, well, it's one each, we're done.
See what that meeting last month did?
But yeah.
Now, you do know what causes those sort of things.
Yes.
Okay, I
yes.
just wanna make sure.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
She hadn't figured it out yet.
Yeah, if you look at his background, I think he's been in chemistry. Probably knows.
Seems like he's had good chemistry going on.
He just follows his class.
Yeah, I'm looking for an out. No, but I get small business owner here in the county. So any meetings, whether they be emergency or scheduled, will be no issue whatsoever. I'm just eager to serve the town in any way that I can. That's why I was here last month. That's why I was here last month. That's why I'm here today, and probably I'll be here again, even if this doesn't go well. So I'm just here to do what I can to contribute. So thank you for the opportunity.
Appreciate you pulling in. Any questions for Jerry? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
good one. Thank you.
Everybody took 30 minutes, but.
sir.
Right, that takes us back to our agenda briefing agenda. And the next item is a closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318, 11A5, to discuss acquisition of real property, and General Statute 143-318, 11A6, to discuss personnel matters. Who all do we need in the room, Mr. White?
We could have the clerk, it's up to Gary or not, if he would like to stay. For the initial part, we may need Paxton because we have Mike Todd come in, for the property acquisition. We need him to do a flash drive and overhead.
You need the other computer.
All right, is there a motion that we go into closed session?
I'll make that motion, we go to closed session.
Motion made that we go into closed session, is there a second?
Second.
Made, received the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hearing none, motion passes.
It didn't, that's a fact.
Oh, shoot.
The other word didn't come out.
Yeah, Gary say, leave it shoot.
Yeah, I accidentally let that other word slip yesterday in front of some grandkids.
They probably let you know about it too.
No, maybe I said it low enough they didn't hear me, because they never said anything, and actually it was Saturday.
Now, this is how you learn,
Do what?
when you least expect.
Let me see.
Now, the little boy, the mom had said it around the little boy, and he had a hard time last summer understanding. Thought it was cute when he said it. But, no, he don't say it anymore.
Okay, we're back in the open session, and appreciate everybody's time tonight. I'm gonna ask for a little bit of forgiveness, because I should have asked this on the agenda. I was asked to do a proclamation for, supermarket employees that performed during the pandemic. And so, February 22nd is Supermarket Employee Day, and they're asking for recognition. So, I could work with Ron and Kim on that proclamation, maybe we can add that to the agenda on Thursday. Anything else that we need to discuss tonight?
Would that be under the consent agenda or
It
under?
would be a consent, and then I'd just read it like any other proclamation
Okay.
under recognition.
Okay,
All right.
sounds good to me.
If not, I'll ask a motion.
Move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Harris was looking down.
He was busy writing.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The opposition, hearing none, motion